Welcome to today's episode for people interested in the extraordinary, yet ancient and often long forgotten stuff. This is your host, Joseph Schinwald from ownbythebeach.com. And our guest today is Robert Gold. Hello, Robert. How are you today? Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, well, thank you, Joseph. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, this will be a very interesting conversation. We have been talking before, not in an episode, but just because we like each other and we feel that we have a great, interesting topics to share. We've talked like 1 hour, right? So the topic today is why words and actions build bridges essential to repairing our future world. There's a lot of things in there, particularly future world and repairing, and what kind of words and actions positive, in all this positivity, how positivity relates to negativity. But today, I think we should really start right away with who you are, and I will introduce you a little bit. Robert Gold is a trust development coach and author, once a telecommunication systems sales executive and owner of an electrical contracting business. Robert has been forever learning and exploring. He became fascinated by the relativity unknown field of ontology, which combines architecture, anthropology, neuro, and cellular biology. He has transformed many lives and has developed accounting systems which support the growth of successful businesses. A visionary and inventor emerged from within, as did an intuitive system which could be the next logical step after the internet. This concept featured within Liberty 2041. That's his book and the book of his wife. They write it together. And Caroline was on the show last time with us. This concept featured with Liberty 2041 improves methods of communication. Feelings and emotions are connected to colors and body sensations, improving our self-awareness. So, Robert, that was your introduction. And now I would like to come to the first question. Tell us about yourself and your profession, and particularly, what is it like being a trust development coach?
Well, I think, so the first thing I notice what's there for me, the first thing to do is to really look at the whole topic of today, which is about repairing a future world. And as human beings, we often look what has already happened. And a lot of our attention is on the past and what, did we accomplish that? It's like all the checklists. Okay, if I check everything off, that means I've accomplished everything, but it's all about what happened in the past. And really the world that you and I and all human beings live in doesn't have anything to do with the past. It's the future. And what are our aspirations of the future? It affects how our mood is and everything else. So trust development, for an example, looks like it might be have something to do with, I can't trust you because of what happened in the past. But trust isn't an element of the past. It's actually what one gives the present and in the future. So again, the field of ontological design or ontology is an interesting one because you really aren't spending much time on what happened in the past. It's really about reflecting and designing oneself for the future.
And the future is also an abstraction. It's also a conceptualization of the mind. The real now, in many ways people speak about the present moment, but that's where all happens. The past happens in the now, and the future happens also in the now, but it happens conceptually as an abstraction. It's not yet real, the future. The past isn't real anymore. There are other views on this subject, like mystic views. They would say, this eternal now is where everything happens. The now is not just the only reality. The past exists right now also, and the future exists right now also. They meet their future self in 20 years from now. Like Dr. Joe Dispenza, right? He wrote this book, I read it, very interesting, supernatural being, I believe. But, I think it would be interesting what you think about this future and past. How real is it?
Well, I think the simplest thing for me to discuss, I think, to answer that question would be a reconstruction of what communication itself is. And so, unfortunately, I'm not incredibly good at marketing. I would have come up with a name for this communication theory, but it's even Aristotle didn't have a name for the communication theory that he captured. It already existed, but he captured it. And basically what it says that there's a speaker, there's a message, and there's a listener. And then in the background, there's obviously understanding. And, he captured that a couple of thousand years ago. And we've pretty much have been building our society on that notion and still to this very day. And it's not a very effective model for communication. So since it wasn't effective, I said, okay, if I was going to reinvent something, not even based on the past, how would I reinvent what communication is? And I didn't want to just look at human beings. I wanted to look at everything from single cell all the way to complex systems in animals and people also. And what I noticed was there was 3 distinct dimensions that were occurring. And you mentioned one of them, which is the eternal essence of now, or I used a little different terminology. It's the world where emotions live. So what's missing in communication is there's emotions in communication, there's body language, there's all these other things, but that doesn't touch it either. What's missing is the dimensionality that's always been there. Now, this is a theory, it's not the truth, but I've over a dozen years, I've been exploring this model. And I haven't found anything. In fact, everything keeps pointing to the validity of the model. So the first one is the essence of there's nothing physical, and there's nothing. There's no time. There's a permanence. It's a distance doesn't matter. You can see it with single cells where they mirror themselves over incredible distances for single cells. And for people, if we look at our experience, when we have these warm feelings or these caring feelings for other people, or have thoughts of them, or we picture them, it's not uncommon for that all of a sudden that person will call or text us. So it's like there's this connection that we go, oh, wow, I was just thinking of you, or that happens often for most of us. And basically the foundation, the emotional foundation, the basic emotions of this are love, peace, and joy. And so now you can look back and look at some philosophies that go back thousands of years, and they talk about this. But I'm just looking at it from it is the least known. Those emotions are the most fleeting. I think you and I have talked about it. When you try to seek happiness or joy, it'll evade you. If you try to seek love, it'll evade you. But if you just allow it, it's always there. So anyway, that's the very basis of life itself, is that it's all connected. It's all one. We're constantly, constantly in relation to one another. We're connected. And then there's the moment now, that, And that moment now is a completely different dimension. We have those moments where we experience the everything or the nothingness of the first dimension, but it's not the same. We just have the experiences of it. This area is both internal and external, and it's only in the moment. There's no time associated, only each moment. And that dimension is very powerful in that it connects us directly with the world and our internal. And the cells do the same thing. They're connected. They recognize what's happening outside of them and within them, and we do the same thing. And there's emotions that around this are very poignant. It's like smelling a rose. It happens in the moment. There's a fullness to it. It's an experiential or very expressive aspect of life itself. That's this domain. And then you go, well, where does reality live? Well, reality lives not in the world. It lives in our internal dialogue, our internal conversations, in our memory. So single cells remember things that are very dangerous. And so if the situation, they have that experience from the second dimension, they'll react and remember what happened, and they'll react because of it. And human beings do the same thing. So a lot of times people call this survival. So basically, so I can make a distinction between the two. The emotions associated with this are usually pensive, thoughtful, deliberating type of emotions. And just like the experience where you smell the flower and it's poignant, when you remove it, you can remember that experience, but it's the remembering of it is not the same as the experience itself. So there's three very distinct dimensions in which life occurs within this theory, and we can see how it plays on us. And so if you were going to ask me a question, I would anticipate, well, so who cares? Why do we need to reinvent communication? And basically what I'm saying is that it's important, especially with the computer age, that computers can recognize a lot of these differences, and they can support us in having a balance between all three dimensions, because if we stay balanced, we can function at a very, very high level. And so the book that you referred to, which is Liberty 2041, takes us 20 years in the future, where humanity's living inside of an invention that I invented about 10 years ago, or over 10 years ago. And it allows for a life that is being supported by technology itself in every way, as opposed to the way current things are inside the internet. So now I really talked a lot. What are you hearing from all this, Joseph?
Well, Robert, I would really appreciate if you would repeat your framework, of the three dimensions once more, not too long, just that I can recognize it as a framework.
Okay.
Because we talked about, the eternal now. We talked about the future and the past and emotions, and so I would like to just get a clearer understanding of the three dimensions, the way you explain it, what that framework you are carrying through in your thoughts. Okay.
So the main dimension, where everything is all connected, is eternal now, and it's about being connected. It's about relating. The main areas of emotions are love, peace, and joy. Ethereal type of emotions, difficult to grasp. It's certainly difficult to understand. The second dimension is only only occurs through our senses. And we have more than 5, but it's a sensual domain of both internal and external aspects of life itself. And it connects us with the world. That's the connection. It's only in a moment. It's not associated with time. But then the third dimension is what is making sense of it, or anticipating what might happen. So again, where people normally live, like in accounting, it's, we do our work and everything else, and then we go, okay, how did we do last month? Or how did we do last year? Or how did we do last month compared to a year ago? So we're constantly reflecting backwards, and that's how businesses have been designed. And that's how we're designed as far as, looking at our checking account, how much do we have left after last month? So that's one way in this third dimension, the one where there is a past, present, future, where the world lives in language, where reality exists. It seems like reality has a past and a future, and that we're real, and that we exist in this moment of time, but that this moment in time was preceded and will be preceded by more time. That's the world in which what seems real, and it's actually has no connection at all with the world at all. It's strictly an internal phenomena that helps us make sense, make decisions, allows us to utilize a made-up notion called time. That was created for us, the whole notion of time. And it looks like time doesn't exist, never did exist. And because our intellect is based on patterns, the days, the hours, even the years, all exist because of the patterns we recognize. Probably the one pattern that was given us through discourse is a week. There's really there's no physical manifestation of a week that's necessary, and yet we have a week. We were given a week thousands and thousands of years ago through a text that has pretty much shaped the world now. So I want to see what you're hearing in that, and whether I was successful in not only distinguishing the three, but also building it more into how it impacts our humanity, and as we've arrived to this moment, and as we will, continue in the future. So, what are you hearing, Joseph?
Yeah, it was clarifying the 3 dimensions. I believe that I always go back to what I understand from world traditions, wisdom traditions. For instance, when I talk, and philosophers, like there is this interesting philosopher, Ludwig Wittgenstein, and he talked about a timelessness. So he didn't talk about eternity. He talked about timelessness. It means that there is no time. Right. Just no time. And then, of course, there's this funny quote from Woody Allen where he says, eternity takes a very long time, particularly towards the end, right? So the whole concept of eternity, when you go to the Tibetan Buddhists, you come to a notion which is absolute relativism. Absolute relativism. In other words, I listened to the Dalai Lama once explaining that concept, and I really liked it because he said, when you have 5 minutes, then 5 minutes is relational to the now. When you have, that's the absolute. That talks about your first dimension, right? When you have a day, that's relative to the now, the day. So time is relative, absolutely. And when you talk about a week, just like you mentioned now, then you have the time frame of a week. It always relates to what? To the absolute. And it's relatively always the future and the past to the now. Yes, I mean, I completely agree with you that our lives, humanity, lives in a constant effect. We are affected by the past, and what we do now affects our future. And so, yeah, I come back to our original topic where you talk about how words and actions build bridges essential to repairing our future world. These words make sense to me because it's a form of communication. I believe that in our world, in our reality, it's so relative that time for us is real, even though metaphysically it's timelessness. Where I come from and when I came from is completely different from where you came from and when you came from. And that makes us already quite unique. We might be just the same essence, the self, the I, but because we have these different experiences, and that is kind of this, what the Hindus talk about, that's the Maya, the world of Maya, the world of the real illusion. That's why everything is so magic, right? Because even magic is related to the word Maya, which is illusion. But we are living in it. We are ourselves that magic. And, we often look outside ourselves and say, let's talk about reality, right? Reality is outside of ourselves. But as you said, and I agree with you 100%, when we talk about reality, and we can talk about emptiness and the void, and the Big Bang or whatever we can talk about. But really, it always refers to me. It always refers to you. And it's all inside of us and outside of us. But for us, it's inside of us.
Yeah, it's again, my background isn't with physics, and yet in my childhood, the person I probably read and studied and admired the most and became a role model for me was probably one of the world's greatest physicists, which was Albert Einstein. And yet, I wouldn't say my strength is in physics itself. How I learned how to think, I attribute to what I read with Einstein, not so much what he thought about. I think what's important is to recognize that our thinking and our thoughts and about whether it's the past or the future, that's the world that we live in, but it's not so much the one we create. And I would say that what we've inherited, we were born into a world that already existed, and then we inherit those conversations. And then, in our own unique way, we may put those conversations together where we have our own points of view. But I would say 90% of the conversations of probably 90% of the people in the world are, pretty much the same. And it's basically because there is a global discourse. And I would say colonization probably cemented all that back in between 16 and 1900, where the discourse is pretty similar no matter where you look. And there's influences of different notions and different ideas are now being shared globally. So, things aren't as isolated as they were 300 years ago. And the conversations that we're engaged in are becoming more and more and more similar, where our differences are becoming fewer and fewer. And I think so. One way of looking at this could be a growth or a spiritual awareness. The other part of it is, just that as human beings, we live in language and we're discursive beings. And what we inherited or what we were born into was a world of discourse. So that's kind of where trust development comes in. Most of my career has been set in providing businesses with an opportunity, not looking backwards, but to look forwards and anticipate their future and actually measure their future and actually track their future. And businesses are, there's a thing called a dashboard that's used in business. And that was something I was introducing back in the mid-90s, 1990s. So, now it's popular, but I don't know what it is. I just always seem to be a little ahead of the curve when I'm inventing stuff. And being that I'm kind of an introvert or I'm a private person, the only way people are going to, find out about it is if either they've hired me or someone else has talked about me and then that person hired me, or they read, a book, and now we have fiction that's going to be demonstrating what it will look like 20 years from now. If instead of being the world like the internet, I would say is commercial driven. It's commercial centric. It's based on advertising. Where in the future, or inside of the world that that was invented, let's say a dozen years ago. By the way, there's some patents. There's a book I wrote. It's called "Dwelling in a New World," but it's a technical book. It's a nonfiction, and it was I think it was finally published in 2012, and it happened simultaneously with patents that were submitted at that time also. And basically what it does is it provides an accounting for the future. Computers can now view us either visually or through other means, electronic means, and anticipate what we're thinking about, whether it's our family or whether it's about work or health and our relationships and our conversations are all divided by domains, which computers are terrible at, but they're great with patterns. So basically, they'll recognize the relationships and they'll be able to distinguish the different patterns based on the changes of us physically. So, like I was talking about earlier, that it can help us stay balanced. And you read the book, right? You read Liberty, the first episode?
Yes, I did.
So you kind of got a sense that
the first episodes.
Yeah. So, you kind of got a sense that how she had, the protagonist had designed it was to support her in being a kinder and more empathetic person, because she's kind of missing some of those qualities. And so, and that's how I see it. And again, it has to do with certain signals, whether it's whether it's audible, whether it's visual, or whether it's tactical. That there are certain feelings and experiences that happen depending on the shifts that are taking place as a warning that you're heading in a direction that's unbalanced. And again, it's I think it'll be distracting for some people, initially. And I think once people get used to it, it can be a really powerful tool and really enhance our ability to connect and be related to other people. And then also within the same technology, it also will allow us to, instead of being commercially, it'll allow us to be consumer centric, so that instead of advertising, the moment that we are interested in something or need something, resources immediately show up. So it's a complete backwards. It's like everything is centric on each person as opposed to people trying to sell us something. And I think it's the best of both worlds. And you're not, if you're interested in a certain type of pastry, you aren't going to be getting ads about it 6 months later. It'll be immediate, and you'll have two choices of where you can go pick up that donut or something. Anyway, that's what I see as possible in the future. I also have questioned the future of binary computer languages. It just seems like there needs to be a choice. So instead of being on and off, it might be, off, left or right. And I think that would be really interesting to have, instead of binary, have like a tertiary type of system. I like threes. I don't know if you're noticing that, 3 dimensions, 3. And then there's an element, it's called graphene, that's very central. It's mentioned a lot in the fiction. It's mentioned a lot in even in something that I came up with 12 years ago. And it's just the nature of carbon itself is such a important aspect to us, and I see it being a very important part of our future. Also, it hasn't really developed quite yet, but it's on its way. So, and it's called graphene. It operates kind of like an interesting superconductor. It deals with electrons in a very unique way, and it's also the very foundation. The hexagon carbon chain is the very essence of the foundation of life itself. So it's just interesting how the two kind of work together. So again, I kind of said a lot there, but anything that you hear in what I just spoke about?
Yeah, I know it's very deep what you're saying. I don't want to come in. I want to rather reflect when you pause, when you finished. So, I got a lot of it. For instance, you said we are inheriting, everything from our language. We're inheriting our body. We're inheriting the language, the ability to think, in a sense. Without the language, how could we really think, right? I mean, I'm sure there is some kind of energy beyond and above before it goes into language. But we think we're similar. And now even more, as you said, because we are so globalized. So we can already, finish each other's sentences often, because we're all on Facebook, right? Or it's not like in former days when you went to a different culture, completely different religion, and all this. That was quite an adventure. And then you say things like this developed, like you have then the similarity of thoughts, and everything is based on the past. And now you are reinventing this, and you're thinking about something completely different, extraordinary, interesting. It's to think about from the future. So it's like almost like to live from a vision of the future and not from kind of the cause and effect relationship from the past, but you live from a vision of the future. And you also mentioned that, because you're a visionary, you also have all these ideas about how computers is going to change, from being, commercially centered and binary to becoming more complex and more actually in the service of the mensch, of the humanness, not just selling more stuff, but helping us in our empathy, in our emotions. And that's also part of your book, helping young people who are in adolescent stages with their emotional development. It's a big problem in our society, in our school system. We don't learn emotional intelligence. We don't learn resilience and important things in life, what really counts. I mean, when everybody gets problems in their lives, and they come from the emotions and stuff, and it doesn't help us that we can really say the alphabet really fast, or that we can multiply super fast, because it's good to know the basics. It's good, the language, the education is all super good. I love it. However, we don't emphasize enough what it means to be human, the humanness in us, the human-heartedness in us. And so that's where I just reflect now on what you have been saying.
That's really great. Well, I love your response. So obviously, whatever, I'm always concerned that people glean something powerful for themselves. And so what you just responded was reinforced that what we've been talking about is, providing a world for you to step into also.
There's one thing I missed out actually explaining, and it is, what I learned from a very central simile of two world religions. It's Hinduism and Buddhism. They explain the universe, or the ultimate reality, in a metaphor, in a simile that's called Lord Indras' net. And I think I had a chance one time to talk with you about this particular metaphor. Why I mention it? Because you've been also talking about something which I share completely, which is the reality is not outside ourselves. And what is outside of ourselves, that is almost, for me, it's all inside myself. Even though implies one implies the other, I know I could not live without the outside. But I perceive everything what is the outside from the inside. But I breathe. I have to breathe. Where is the oxygen? It comes from the outside, right? I have to talk with other people like you in order to get wiser. We share viewpoints and all this, the outside, right? But ultimately, it always comes back to my reality, my magic happens inside. And so that is that wonderful metaphor, similar Lord Indras' net, which illuminates for me what you said, probably learning it from science, which is that phenomena that, outside there is really, you end up in nihilism if you go outside as a human being. And in that Lord Indras' net, it's the same thing. I actually wrote my thesis on it for my master's degree in divinity, because I got so interested in Buddhism and Hinduism that time. It's a long time ago now. It is like this. There is this Lord Indra, and he hung at the crossing points of a gigantic net of jewels. That's where the jewels are, at the crossing point of this gigantic net, which is a jewel itself. That's reality. That's all it is. And all these jewels, just like us, and we are at the crossing points in that net. We reflect each other ad infinitum. We reflect each other. Now think about it. There's nothing to look for outside of ourselves. Correct? So, because when you look outside yourself, then you don't reflect the universe anymore. It's all like that principle of resemblance. So we are reflecting everything from the inside out. Yet there are many doing that. The whole universe is like this. It's like a billion ways the universe looks at itself through us, according to this metaphor. And I just, when I hear you, and you're, I know you're coming from a Judaic tradition, the Talmud, and that's wonderfully interesting to me also. And your philosophy is exactly that one point, that nothingness is not really nothing. That is the void. That's us. That's where we come from. That's who we are, ultimately. We need that contrast to the being. We need non-being. Very important concept also in Taoism. However, when you look now outside of yourself, we look outside of ourselves for love. Outside of ourselves, We look for so many things, for happiness. And all we get is nihilism, big frustration,
Yeah, so most of my background up until recently has been inside of science or ontological design itself. And I'd say probably the last 2 or 3 years, because I met Carolyn and just some life experiences, I recognized that there's something that is cohesive with that first dimension I was talking about. That's the everything or nothing, and it's all time and no time, all that stuff. And so I've been getting involved more with ontological thought. So that's reading the ancient texts, things that are thousands and thousands of years old. And it's not that I didn't read old texts or look at art or look at artifacts and stuff in ontological design, but the emphasis was on the whole spectrum, where ontological thought is really all centered on only on ancient manuscripts. And again, it can be, like you said, Judeo-Christian, it can be Talmudic, it can be, there's a bunch of literature in the East also that is, very ancient and very old. And so in the book itself, not so much the one I wrote, almost 10 years ago, but the one that Carolyn and I are redesigning, it's really about the wisdom of music, of art, of sensoriness, of it's real. There's something about the power and the wisdom of being able to gain access to patterns that Illustrator provide, or that allow us to develop and mature and to gain emotional resilience and those type of aspects of it. And that, that really, that's where the repair of the world takes place. It's so to the degree that we can care for life itself.
Because we are. We are
Yeah. And I mean, if we don't, I look at myself, I'm kind of an interesting man. When it comes to where I'm the most comfortable, it's usually, even though I'm very much a man, I'm much more comfortable in a more feminine type of environment. I like to be around women more than, I would say, men. Like, instead of going to a bar and go drinking with a guy, I'd rather have an interesting conversation with men or women that are more sensitive and that are talking about things in more depth, kind of like what you and I are doing. Where, I realize you're a man, but we're talking about something that has depth. It's like there's the opportunity is to gain aspect to something that would increase our curiosity, that would increase our wisdom. And I'm using those two synonymously.
Yeah, the Taoist.
So what are you hearing in that? Yeah.
If you're a man, be the yang, but know the yin. So if you're a woman, be the yin, but know the yang. And ultimately, it's a huge diversification and variety in the world because of just those two different polarizations, which is a spectrum. And the Taoists just called it the sunny side and the shadow side of the mountain, which is the sunny side, the yin, shadow side, the yang. And ultimately, it's always just the artificial, intellectual, conceptual division of the one which is divided now in order for this spectacle, this show, which we experience, to happen. I would love to know more about the main storyline of the Liberty 2041 according to you. I asked your wife, Caroline, and it was very interesting, but I also would like you to talk about it, because there will be some people, they will go to the link in the show notes which leads to the book, and now your other episodes are also live, so it's like an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
So what is the main storyline in Liberty 2041? I read the first episode.
Well, so first of all, there's just something about the innocence and the wisdom of youth. Okay, so it's like, wow, how can you have innocence and wisdom? So the setting of the book is 20 years from now, and the world has not resolved its issues yet. Big surprise, 20 years from now, and that we're on the verge of collapse as far as life being able to support itself on the earth. We've been, even though it's not directly in the book, but we've been ravaged by one epidemic after another. And now we have nanotechnology that protects us from most of the viral issues and diseases and epidemics that have been going on in the world. So basically, what this story is about, it's really about the ingenuity of people, of governing what is time, really. And if we had complete control over time, what would that open up? So in the first book, there's probably not much reference to aspect of time, but the second book, there's something very interesting that happens with time, and there's these kids that have been downtrodden on, even though they have this technology and they're incredibly well connected with computers in a ubiquitous environment. They're now being stripped. It's just kind of like anytime you give somebody a little bit of power, then you try to take it away. And that's kind of the theme in this, is that this person is, there's like somebody trying to suppress both the aged and the people that are young. But this is pretty much going more on the young, because the people that were older have been protected already 20 years from now, but the young people are still being attacked. So yeah, go ahead.
There's a villain.
Yeah.
The world chancellor.
Yeah, he's a villain, and and you'll love these characters. There's one of the things that again, the whole notion of this is that in 6 days the world is completely repaired and protected and defended against anything that's harmful. And you go, well, how could that happen in 6 days? Well, you have to read the all 6 episodes to see what happens. And it basically it's done through some ancient wisdom, mysticism, something that's been that's always been there and it's getting uncovered 20 years from now. And we're getting to see that uncovering, and then what happens. So the name of the book is Liberty, because it's about them liberating themselves, both emotionally, physically, and liberating the world from harm, and liberating life from harm. So yeah, that's kind of what I see the book about, and it definitely has a mystical component to it. It may be another way of like how it's referred to is outer worldly type of influence. And there's evidence that that we're not here alone on Earth. That there's probably other life that's here or been visiting or those type of things. And again, I don't know what direct evidence. We're not privy to a lot of it, but I would be real surprised if we're alone in this universe. I can't imagine there being less than probably 1 million other intelligence, some probably far greater than ours. We are pretty limited. We can basically just understand patterns.
That is so interesting because I don't think much about it, but I studied the world religions. I've been studying it since a long time. Mm-hmm. And in Hinduism, they have this multi-dimensional worlds, which our scientists now discover as well. And it's like horizontally, it's infinite galaxies, right? Galaxies, obviously, I've not experienced another galaxy myself. I'm just listening to others. I read it in scientific journals, see it on television, that they look through telescopes where they can see all this outside stuff, right? Mm-hmm. We have to trust that also, it's also man-made. Mm-hmm. Sure, it's very trustworthy. And so in Hinduism, according to mythology, probably some shamans drinking some soma, they had these experiences. There is this teaching of the multidimensional universe, horizontally, and infinite galaxies, vertically, infinite tiers. So when you talk now about people on this planet who are more intelligent than us, other beings more intelligent than us, then obviously, that's a possibility because, if there is infinite vertical dimensions, then we are somewhere on a stage. It's like, they have another metaphor in Hinduism. It's like we are coming like the water in a cup, and we're all going towards the top to evaporate. But it's ultimately infinite vertical levels. And we become more self-aware of ourselves. We become wiser. Maybe one time we don't have to come back to this earth. Maybe we deserve a better one because we are better. Ultimately, I do probably disagree a little bit about one thing with you, and that's fine to disagree, to agree to disagree. Mm-hmm. I believe this world is a middling world, and it will always be like that. So there will be never any paradise or return to paradise. There will be never any heaven. I just don't believe it. I believe it's a middling world. It's always a middle. We have to look for the middle in this world because there's always this polarity. That's the whole action. That's the drama. That is the drama. That's not just my belief. That's a Hindu worldview. Even though I'm not Hindu, I have no religion whatsoever. I had religion, and I don't want anymore. I don't want to be in a box. But it's, a Judeo-Christian tradition, of course. But as I said, for me, it seems we come to this world, or we come out of this world, and all we experience is this middling world. Maybe our parents, they've been already fighting. Or there's the yin and yang, not in the beautiful way, right? But it's also in a beautiful way. We fall in love. There's this yin and yang again. Happens to us differently. But ultimately, I think, it is this aspect. And the Buddha himself, after he joined the ascetics and became an ascetic himself, and he did all this weird stuff, 6 years in the forest, just not eating anymore, almost dying, asceticism. And then he came out and he just left them. He went to the river and somebody fed him something and he ate and they cursed him for it. And then he became his disciples, but he became aware that it's not about one extreme. It's not about the other extreme. It's about the middling world. It's about the middle path. It's about avoiding the extremes. And yes, I agree. They can also become very extreme, that middle way. Particularly if you read some philosophers in Buddhism, early ones, like Nagarjuna, it's not easy to understand to be in a world where there is no viewpoint whatsoever, just a void. Mm-hmm. It's a double negation. It's like I exist, I do not exist. I both exist and do not exist. I neither exist nor do I exist. Yeah. It's like always like finding the middle.
Yeah.
And that's where I disagree a little bit with it. But on the other hand, I would say, to come to my conclusion, that it's super fascinating for me to see how, and I do see the reason behind it, to see how in a world where everything is like our actions and thoughts are always, and they're coming back to our title, to the topic today, where they are always like coming from the past, from a past world and a world of inheritance. And to see this now from a vision of the future, which humans are totally capable of, because if we can be influenced by the past, we can also influence ourselves from a vision of the future. And where like our technologies change and more in our service, not just about commercial stuff. And so it's fascinating, how we can repair the world. That's where I say, can the world be repaired? I don't know. But that's that would be another discussion. The conclusion is people don't know.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to. You were saying something, and I kind of lost a little bit of what was there for me, because So one of the things you need to know about me is I listen, and I rarely have thoughts, and I think that's probably what helps me being helping with trust is that I'm not judgmental, and I don't really look at stuff, and I don't look at, oh, I agree with that or I disagree with that. I'm really interested in what you just said. And one of the things about religions in general is they're all man-made.
Yes.
They're all man-made.
Yeah.
And that sometimes, and I look at when I was writing the original manuscript, and now I can see it as we're reconstructing it, is things aren't coming from us, they're coming to us. And then it's getting expressed. So it's, and a lot of my inventions, I don't know where they came from. They came to me. They didn't come from me. So, and I don't have an explanation for that other than that dimension where everything's all connected. Then it kind of starts making sense. I'm not sure where we really disagree. When you were talking about the, opposites are definitely there. There's hot and cold. There's happiness and sadness. There's love and apathy. There's all these different opposites of everything.
Yes.
Yes. And so and in fact, one of the things that if you would have read The Dwelling in the New World, there was if something was good or bad, it took on a quality of either light or darkness in the shade of it. Mm-hmm. So it's I think these are important aspects. The world of opposites of in that way, there is a binary aspect of existence.
As I listen to you, I do not disagree with you. I wanted to say that I'm not very much concerned about paradise or making the world a better world or repairing the world, even though I probably do at some degree because I have a conscience. But, I just like to see the whole thing as a learning experience. And I like to keep myself out of the picture. My consciousness, as I see it, has nothing to do with this. It doesn't have anything to do with it. I'm not my body. I'm not my mind. My consciousness, that's me. That's also just a word. But that goes then into what is reality, right? But reality is really not anymore that yin and yang thing, that binary thing, because reality is the oneness of all this.
Right.
But reality is not better than this magic of this world we experience, because of the binary, of the yin and yang, the multiplicity of all things. I love magic. I love it, what this world can offer. And I'm happy to be here and have this sensory experience and learning experience. But I also know that my, let's say, suchness, who I really am, is both. It's both. It's like the Hindus say, the chess player is moving the pieces of the chess game, and he knows he's not the pieces. He's not the king. He's not the queen. He's not the farmer or whatever. He is the player, and he plays the game. And whether he wins or loses, it is equanimity. Why? Because there is something going on here. There's something going on here. Because when you go to this metaphysical stuff, you come to somewhere where you just have to reset, probably, because when nothing is going on anymore, there has to be something going on again, right? That's why they talk about the divine game, the divine play, lila, in Hinduism. I like Hinduism because it has influenced totally Buddhism. So Buddhism and Hinduism is almost the same. Then comes Taoism, and that actually complements that whole thing again. And I come from a Christian tradition, so I know that plays also, and I like the variety of it, because I would hate it if there would be just, like you have in the book, if there would be just one villain and he would control all religions. There's only one religion, and that would be terrible.
So one of the aspects that always fascinates me, and again, I'm not a physicist, so but I do comprehend certain notions. So, Einstein said there's no, and actually Newton said there's no gravitational force because there's no pulling forces in the world as far as we understand. And Einstein said, well, it's the mass that shapes space, which is what creates gravity. So it's mass that creates the effects that we call gravity, not that there's a force involved. It's like everything, space itself is warped by the mass. So that's one aspect. The other aspect, so this is that fascinates me, is that it's all space. I mean, there's really, if you look at what is mass, what is matter, and what we're discovering as we're getting better and better at looking deeper and deeper inside the patterns that we can discover, that we can observe, is that we aren't really sure there is any mass. It looks like it's all space and maybe just energy.
Yes.
And if that's the case, and if we observe it, so the 2-slot experiment, where if we observe it, it operates differently than if we don't observe it. So there's like all these physical things that are there. So if I was to expand my theory beyond life, I would say that maybe it goes to each atom, that each atom is actually intelligent, not just each cell of life. And again, I'll leave this for the next 100 years or something for physicists to talk about. But I just see the connection of the oneness, and then the binary, and then the tertiary. And in the second book, in episode 2, what's introduced has an aspect of being able to dominate time, or to alter our relationship to time. And one of the things that, and again, it just came to us, is using the Fibonacci. So if you notice, the Fibonacci starts with 1, then it goes to 2, and then it goes to 3, and then it skips, it goes to 5, and then 8, and then 13. And so these numbers have a significance to them. And I didn't know what the significance was until it just came on me. And that's That's revealed in hours, which is I think it's hours. Yeah. I think it's hours. I'll make sure it's not this one. Yeah, hours, which is the last book in the last short story in the second episode, where it starts revealing an incredible wisdom and I'm not even sure where it came from. It came through me. And it came from the ontological design and ontological thought together, and then incorporating the aspect of life, which is the very aspect of life in the universe and everything else, is the Fibonacci spiral. So I'm really interested in, as people start getting more and more into the Hexa series, how many questions all this brings up for people.
Yes, exactly. That is beautiful. It's very stimulating. It makes you think, and you want to know more. And so I got to know a little bit more today, interviewing you. It was a long interview. I think we went over an hour. But, it was good at the end, particularly. We came to some kind of climax, talking about you at the end, and that before a little bit about similar things, but from different reference points of reference. Not disagreeing, but just obviously, the world doesn't have to be like this. Everybody comes from the same point of reference, Would be boring. So, in the show notes, I have I interviewed your wife before that show in the last episode, and there will be also in this show notes, there will be the website, thegoldtouch.net. So interestingly enough, people can get in touch with you on thegoldtouch.net. And then there is the link to the book, also to the Amazon where it sells. And to repeat one more time, this wonderful topic we had today, I think we came very close to illuminating this topic, why words and actions build bridges essential to repairing our future world. With words and actions, of course, you mean also emotions, correct?
Yeah.
So
it's we're sensory beings for sure.
Yeah.
That's what brings us into the world, is our senses.
We are quite long into this episode now, but I still have one question. How do you define ontology? What is it to you?
Well, ontology is it's the study of reality for and there's also the notion of it's the study of being of human beings. So which is basically saying the same thing. So reality is an aspect of who human beings are, in that it's the sense we make of the world. It's the only place where we can discuss and talk is in reality. What is reality? That's a whole different conversation. But I think that's it. It's the study of reality. It's a study of the being of human beings.
Study of yourself.
It's just study of life. Study of maybe.
Yourself. Robert, I really have to finish because, believe it or not, in 5 minutes I have a business meeting. So I have to wrap it up.
Well, thank you.
It took a little longer,
Okay.
So I have to wrap it up, Robert. Thank you, Robert, for being on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to visit with you.
It was a real pleasure. And thank you, my dear listeners, for joining us today. The recap of the show will be all in the show notes with the questions, the bullet points, and particularly the links mentioned during the interview, the website and the book. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to have you here again for our next episode. This is your host, Joseph Schinwald. Thank you and goodbye until we meet again.